That's right. That's right.
Bravo.
So we are in chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot, and we are still at Mishnah 13. So we were looking at these elements of Hillel's vernacular advice, and we were looking. The last thing we looked at, I think, was about anyone who doesn't want to increase their knowledge ends up either minimizing their knowledge, losing their knowledge, or it just gets stuck, it gets frozen. And the point of knowledge is that it needs to increase. I'm telling you, look at this. What's going on here? This is like something is wrong. There's too many people coming into the to the session today. So God. All right.
They're up. We'll have to start raising our advertising rates.
I know. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. I'm telling you. Okay. So I wanted to just juxtapose this teaching. We had different translations. Real quick, let's have like one pretty conventional translation, and then we'll have Rabbi Shapiro's translation. Okay. Who's going to give us a conventional translation of the second phrase? Udalo mosif yasaf.
I'll read it.
Thank you.
He who does not study deserves to die.
No, that's the next one.
Oh, I thought you wanted the second one. Okay. He who does not increase his knowledge decreases it.
Okay, that's the one. That's the second one. The first one is about ego and reputation and fame.
Right.
Right. So
A name made great is a name destroyed.
right.
Yes.
That's the first one. The second one is if you don't increase your knowledge, you will you say destroy it?
Decrease it.
Decrease it. Okay. And now what's the kind of more unconventional translation, shall we say?
Cling to knowledge and you will lose, cling to knowledge and you will forget wisdom.
Okay, so there's made the distinction. It's not about quantity, it's about quality.
Quality.
Right? Yes, Geraldine, what do you want to say?
Mine is almost like Sarita's knowledge not increased, his knowledge decreased.
Right. So that's it. Are we talking about one particular thing, or are we talking about what knowledge is supposed to end up leading us to? Or I would add another possibility. We're going to get to it in the next one, but are we talking about the person themselves? I mean, is knowledge just this commodity? I've got a lot of knowledge. I've got only a little bit of knowledge. I've got this type of knowledge. I've got this brand of knowledge instead of that brand of knowledge. What does knowledge in the end actually have to do with you? And if we're talking about, as Hillel really is talking, he's talking about studying Torah, because for Hillel and for the rabbis, the Torah is the most rich and most precious and most true source of knowledge. So I want to juxtapose that saying with the famous story that we've heard so many times. When somebody comes to Hillel and says, "Teach me the whole Torah on 1 foot." Remember that story? So when he goes to Shammai gets real angry at him, and he chases him away, and he says, "What a chutzpah! Get out of here!" So when Hillel is confronted by this person, and the person knows that this is provocative, that's why he's sort of testing these sages, and Shammai confirms his assumption that, okay, if you say this to a rabbi, believe me, they'll get angry. The Hillel defies his expectation. Hillel answers him gently, and he gives him a beautiful nugget of wisdom, which is with us to this very day and important, right? Don't treat other people in a way that you wouldn't want to be treated yourself, right? That's what he says. Then he says, that's the whole Torah. Then what does he say?
Go and study.
Go and study.
He says everything else is commentary.
Commentary,
Now
go
go
and
and
study.
study. Right? The idach pirusha zilgmor. He says that also in Aramaic. All of that is in Aramaic. He's talking the language of the street, the vernacular. So how does that I'm thinking that story could be brought to bear on this particular piece of advice that he's giving us. What's Hillel's approach to gaining knowledge, or to gaining knowledge of the Torah? Bill.
Well, I'm going to quote from a note that Rabbi Shapiro has. Knowledge is the known. Wisdom is the unknown. The known is the past. The unknown is the timeless present. And Hillel seems to be combining those two. Do unto others, etc. is the known. That's clear. But all of the commentary is still the unknown. And
to be determined, and to be unfolded,
and to be
right?
to be determined, not fixed.
It hasn't been exhausted yet. Craig.
I think what he's also saying is there's a lot to learn, but you have to do the studying. You can't be spoon-fed everything.
Okay, so he says, right, I can give you this piece, but now you go and you study the rest. Right, I can give you a little bit, but now what are you going to do? Okay, Jen.
I just have a question. Do we think Hillel bought into the multiple intelligences theory? Like there's different ways of studying, there's different things that we are capable of learning. There's, we have our strengths and weaknesses, and not everyone is going to be suited to serious study of Torah, in the sense that we think of people sitting and studying Talmud today. I mean, we're not all on the same level in that way. And now he's talking to a guy, especially in this case, who's coming from a different background entirely. He's probably going to have to learn a new language and, everything before he can even get seriously started. Is Hillel taking all of this into account?
You have to ask him. You'd have to ask him and find out. I think that those are all good questions, and I'm saying, and in fact, the word Torah is not mentioned in any of these phrases, right? None of these phrases has that word in it. It's sort of, as I'm saying, it's implied, but it's not explicit.
Well, he said that was the whole of the Torah, right?
In that particular story, but here in this particular series of teachings, right?
Oh, where we are at right now.
He doesn't actually mention Torah per se, but even when we have that saying, that story, something's echoing. Is there a reason why it's echoing? The question will then come up, actually, what do you mean by Torah? Right, and Rabbi Shapiro's also avoids it and talks about knowledge and wisdom. When Hillel says this is the whole Torah, that's pretty counterintuitive. The Torah is 5 books of Moses, books of the prophets, books of the writings. There's plenty of Torah, and then there's the whole oral Torah. It just goes on and on and on. So when Hillel says that's the whole Torah, that should be a very surprising statement for anybody, and that's an act of wisdom on his part, right? He's looking underneath. Well, you're supposed to keep Shabbat. Well, you're supposed to wear tefillin. Well, you're supposed to leave a corner of your field. Well, you're supposed to not become impure and then go into the sanctuary. And Hillel says, you know what? There's one common denominator for all of that. It's don't treat others as you wouldn't want to be treated yourself. That would actually, that statement, this is where I'm coming to. We take that statement, most of us, I think, can affirm that statement as being pretty wise, pretty good guideline. But to say that that's actually the whole Torah, and to connect that to the rest of the Torah.
Hey, Rabbi, can you mute Helen? I can't really hear you.
Where is Helen? Helen,
You can, only you can mute her because you're in control of the meeting. If you click participants and click her
Got
microphone,
it.
it'll mute her.
I muted her. There you are. So we muted you, Helen. No offense. When you need to say something, because otherwise it gets too distracting. Everybody hears all of the noise in your home.
Oh, you heard the phone ring? I'm
I
sorry.
heard everything and everything. So now I'm going to mute you again.
Why?
So because I don't want everybody to be treated the way they don't want to be treated. So that's the thing. That's the whole Torah. So back to the idea of the whole Torah. To actually make that connection would require a tremendous amount of exploration. How would any of the rest of the Torah that we identify, how would that then actually connect up with that? So we have a tendency to try to simplify stuff and make it easy, right? We've got, remember what there used to be, now it's not so much, but there was a whole, quantum physics for dummies, brain surgery for dummies, rocket science for dummies, all this, kind of, let's make it really, really simple and handleable. And we have it also with regard to our own study of Judaism. I'm preaching to the choir. I'm seeing so many here of people who really want to study more Torah. So you can disregard everything that I'm saying here as a kind of a bemoaning. But the truth is that American Jewry is the most well-educated community pretty much in America in secular pursuits. We have the most college degrees and per capita and professional education and all this kind of other stuff. But we're really woefully failing in terms of in-depth Jewish knowledge. And, so then, Rabbi, can you please do a Judaism 101? Sure, of course. Shammai might get a little upset. Hillel says, yeah, of course I'll do it. But then go learn the rest of it. Then go continue to study. And we're, as a community, again, everybody here, kudos to you because you're actually in the vanguard of a community that is not is not the real community of learners that we could be. And of course, it doesn't have to be zooming in on a class. We live in a time where Jewish knowledge is so accessible in so many different forms, in so many different media, that anybody can do it anytime they want. So the point that Hillel is making here is knowledge needs to be increased. You can't simply say, okay, good, give me the ABCs and I've got it. That's all I want, right? I want to be able to have my bar mitzvah or my bat mitzvah, and then, I want to disappear. But that's unfortunately I think a really serious phenomenon within the greater American Jewish community. And it's a problem. Sarita.
So I was thinking that, it's like we want to, it's like when you read a research study and you want to jump to the conclusion and that's all you want to read. But it's so important to know, one, why that question was asked, how the data was collected, how someone came to that conclusion. You really can't know what the conclusion means and the implications, and also the limitations of that conclusion, unless you've really explored, how someone got to that point and thought about what it all means. So that's what I was thinking about when you were bringing this up. Yeah. Also another thing, in the Times Sunday Review today, on the last page, there was.
When you talk that way, nobody can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking
Yeah.
at the newspaper. In the Times today, there was the Sunday Review section. There was a piece about people's belief in these global conspiracy theories and why they're so attractive And what the person was saying was that they are attractive because they simplify and they make people end up feeling like they understand that, right? But what it does is grossly simplify. And if you think about it, they're absolutely not even possible. It's not even possible that that could be true. But the fact that, you know, people want to be able to understand and they want a simple explanation, you know, is where that comes from. And so there's a danger in that.
Right. All of this actually, Jen, I hope that you see this actually is all connected to your question also.
It is. I was just thinking in terms of my family that my family was Jewish at one point on my father's side and became very secular and then became not Jewish. And it was like a certain point, there's like, oh, it's easier to be Episcopalian. And then it was easier to be nothing. And it's very interesting to me. I feel like even now with my generation, I converted in, my brother married Jewish, 2 cousins married Jewish, like a whole bunch of Jewishness came back into the family. And I think there are certain family members who are like, wait, just when we thought we were out, and now we have to worry about seders and stuff. This is not fair. How did this happen? But I feel like, though, there is a sense that Judaism is super intimidating. Like that's a sense I get from members of my family who still remember being Jewish, and especially when my grandfather was alive. And it's just like, it's like this super high bar that is really hard to go back to. And that was part of why I had that question. Like, I feel like it shouldn't feel like it's this big, intimidating, high bar thing that, you know, if you don't reach a certain level, you don't belong. And I don't know if that's a universal thing. I just know from my family, that's the perception of it.
So I think there's a couple of things to say about that, including things from before. The perception. Well, first of all, look, it's really a historical fact that literacy and book learning has been highly, highly, highly prized among the Jewish people. So that's just been going on for a long time. And in various cultural contexts, that was also seen as, oh, the Jews are the educated ones, and they're the smarty ones, and all this kind of other stuff. And then, of course, it gets into resentment because, until very recently, literacy was not a majority phenomenon in most of the cultures out there. The literacy was an elite phenomenon. So and that comes back to your question about multiple intelligences, right? I would like to say, yes, there is a repository of wisdom and just plain knowledge that the Torah encompasses within its very highly cherished textual tradition. But part of what Hillel is saying is, and this can apply to everybody, and including highly textually educated people, are you delving deeper? Are you trying to actually, the word here is mosif and yasaf, which is to increase or to die, to stop. I mentioned that last time. So if you think of things as just being cumulative, oh, now I've learned, 10% of the Torah, but how am I going to learn the rest 90% of the Torah? It's so intimidating. That could be, a disincentive to study. But if it's about growing, think about a little acorn. Does a little acorn say, how the hell am I going to become a big oak tree? It's impossible. I'll never be able. So I'm just not going to do it. Guess what? If you naturally keep growing, you'll grow. So with humans, obviously, there's a lot more volition and intention that needs to be applied. But growth is life. Growth is about living. So the intimidation part doesn't have to be there when you recognize how vast this stuff is and say, oh no, I forget it, I can't do it. Part of the intimidation, unfortunately, is both cultural and also a product of anti-Semitism. because anti-Semitism partly is based on critiques of Judaism, which says Judaism makes life too hard for you, just do love and you won't have to do all this other stuff. In fact, the whole system that Judaism creates is really just to trip you up. I mean, this is back to gospel stuff, unfortunately, in a certain way.
I do want to say that there's not a big history of anti-Semitism in my family.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not accusing them, God forbid, of it, but anti-Semitism has saturated Western culture, and views of what Judaism entails has been totally influenced by those kinds of negative stereotypes. So back to what Hillel is saying is how I can make connections between simple pieces of wisdom and Torah. If you want to go out there, you're not a textual scholar. For you, you love to garden. You know what? We have a whole, Garden of Eden story. We have a whole, stretch of nature imagery and lore in the Torah. Maybe that's the way for you to get into Torah. A friend of mine, just because he knows he's a rabbi, and he knows how much I love my dog. He sent me a book written by another rabbi. What I learned, what my dog taught me about being a better human. It's by Rabbi Jonathan Wittenberg, a Masorti rabbi in England. Simple book, very simple, but he keeps on connecting it back to the Torah. He comes from that vantage point. He's trying to learn. He's trying to grow. So part of what this is saying is, if you put Judaism in a box and you think that it can stay in that box, it will wither and die. If you think that Judaism is something that can be constantly expanded and be a vehicle for growth, then you've got a tree of life. So I think that's part of what he's saying. When Hillel talks to that person who challenges him, he's saying, look, I can give you something. This is really crucial, but now go see how you can ramify it. Go see how you can make it greater. At the end of the prayer Uva L'Tzion, which we recite at different times, it's recited at the end of the traditional morning prayers, right before Aleinu. It's recited on Shabbat. It says, Hashem chafetz leman tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir. That the eternal desires on behalf of God's own righteousness, that the Torah get bigger and bigger and bigger and more glorious. That the Torah just grow and grow and grow. So that's part of what Hillel, I think, is trying to convey here. And then we, any other comments on this, or else we're going to keep on going? Yes, Josie. Whew. Thank God we don't have to keep on going. Go ahead.
I sometimes think that with my studies with you and other people in the synagogue, that I know maybe a quarter of a drop of knowledge in the ocean of Jewish learning. But I think most Jews don't even know there's an ocean out there. They get stuck on one thing, like, oh, it's too much trouble to keep kosher, or I don't want to give up my Saturday activities. And to them, that's what Judaism is.
Or Hebrew.
It's too bad, because there is a huge ocean out there of knowledge. Oh, I couldn't learn Hebrew, right?
Right. So first of all, a quarter of a drop is also a drop, right? Quarter of a drop is a drop. So that's number one. And number two, when people go to the ocean and swim in the ocean, they don't beat themselves over the head by saying, oh my God, the ocean is so much bigger and I'm only swimming in these 100 feet of the ocean. God, this is so depressing. I'm never going to go to the ocean again. You're in the ocean. You're in the ocean. So even your little tiny little piece is in the ocean. Yeah. Craig.
At the end of the play Camelot, the final line that Arthur speaks, he says, sometimes the things that we do may be just a drop in the ocean, but those drops sparkle.
Right? Very good. Shkoach. Right. And all right. So, all right. So, because we only have a couple of minutes. One more story. It's a story that I've told before. It's a beautiful story. I love this story. One of the stories about Rabbi Akiva, how Rabbi Akiva became Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the greatest rabbi of rabbinic Mishnaic Judaism. And he was a story of a person who until he was 40 was illiterate. Right? He knew no Judaism whatsoever. I mean, he knew Judaism just because he was living in a Jewish world, but he didn't know anything. He couldn't read alphabet. And one of the stories that was woven around his life, and we looked at some of them in our Kosher Salt series. One of the stories is that he was a shepherd, and he came to the well to draw water for his flock, and he saw that the stone at the place where people were drawing water had been worn away. And he looked around and he said to some of the other people, "What gives with this stone? Why is this stone so much, more eroded and it's smoothed out?" And they said, "Don't you know?" And they quote him a verse, right? And that's one of the sweetnesses of the story, but we're not getting to it now. And they say, "Avanim shachaku mayim," that hard stones can be worn away by water. It's a verse in Job. So he said, he looked at that worn away stone, and he said, what they said was, because people come, they drip a drop of water from when they pull the water out of the well. The drop of water hits the stone, and after generations and generations, the stone gets worn away. So Rabbi Akiva then said, if that can happen to this stone, then how much more so could it be that the drops of water can wear away my hard heart? Right? He said, my heart is a stone now. I feel it like a stone in my being. But maybe the drop of the water of Torah can wear it away too. There is hope for me. And he immediately went and he started studying in Hebrew school with his son. And the picture is that he and his son would use the same writing tablet to learn the Aleph Beis. So he was on his way at that point, just because of a drop, a little drop. Okay. So next week we'll move right along at breakneck speed, and we'll keep on going. Okay, so I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving in some way or other.
Happy
And,
Thanksgiving.
and a good
Stay
week.
safe.
And a good week.
Yashikah.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.